Another week has passed, and here we are back at YouTube. We're looking at body language this week, and as we said, we constantly monitor the pack for social interactions and make sure that there's a good compatibility with the group. And what we're watching with Denali is some real interesting testing behavior, but it's very intimidating. You can see his ears are pricked and turned to the side. He's a little anxious about Grizzer. He's very social, a lot of tail wagging, certainly wants to engage in behavior with Grizzer. But Grizzer's been doing some really interesting body language and real interesting intimidation without having to touch Denali at all. And one of the things that Grizzer's been doing, kind of hiding behind rocks and kind of peeking his head up, and his ears are always seem to be perked forward with interest or intent when he's kind of direct gazing at Denali. We do see howling as part of the social dynamics here, and again, just another body language and behavioral situation as Grizzer moves himself to the highest vantage point in the enclosure, and that's well, it's not the highest vantage point, but in the front of the enclosure, being on this rock puts them at a higher position than the other wolves. And Shadow used to do this quite a bit, and so now we're seeing Grizzer kind of taking on that role. And you watch Denali here, still very nervous. He wants to howl, he wants to rally, but typically what happens with howling, and again, it's a little bit interesting, is that the pack may howl in the wild to rally after there's been some separation. So there seems to be some inherent dominance that follows a pack howl. And what that means is after wolves have been separated for a while, rally, get back together, they might reassert their positions and within the rank order. And so there's always a little bit of nervousness with howling. And Denali never used to really have that issue, but initially we see that he was a little intimidated. And the other thing too, it is a little windy. You see Grizzer look up there in the wind. Being in a forested environment makes them a little nervous for trees coming down, and so that might be part of it. But one of the other things you'll notice as we pan over to the other side of the enclosure, Maya's doing some howling here, but prior to the howl, she actually charged Aiden and is kind of keeping Aiden along the fence line on the far side. We did observe Aiden howling even he was over there, and that's an improvement than in previous months. He was real intimidated to actually howl and rally. So here he's howling, but he's staying along the fence line, kind of out of the pack's way during this kind of social interaction. Other than that, Aiden, again, is most likely going to remain the Omega position. At this point, it's a little bit hard to predict, but I would say that Grizzer's stepped forward and really become a little more assertive in his status and a little less tolerant of Denali, and that would make him a more dominant leader. Now, he's completely different than what we saw with Shadow. Grizzer is not a proactive leader, not a strong leader, but a responsive one when the situation calls for it. And here you'll see him circling, and his tail goes up in a high tail. Denali's drops to a 3.5, meaning touching his haunches, intimidated, running away from Grizzer, and the whole time Grizzer's tail is in arousal at a T1 over the back or T2 straight back. And that body language is really an indication that Grizzer is confident in his abilities to deal with Denali. And that was a little bit of a four-leg stab there, a very common behavior, a lot of common desting behavior. What's interesting about the body language, you see the very, very excitable tail wags. And again, just a reminder that these are social pack animals. These are best known for their hunting predatory behavior, but the reality is a majority of wolves' life is spent in social dynamics, interacting with each other. And Aiden and Denali, as being litter mates, still continue to jaw spar, still continue to have behaviors that are classic of litter mates. But here's a great example of the two tail postures that we talk about. A T3, which is down below the back, and a T3.5, which is touching the haunches. You can see that in the body language of Aiden. That tail is touching his haunches. He is not as confident as Denali in any of those situations primarily, but even in this situation with just Denali and Aiden interacting. Maya comes by with a T2, straight back, and certainly maintains it that way. Grizzer is a relaxed, dominant male. Doesn't need to show his tail very high, but he does on occasion. And here you'll see, if Maya moves her head, you'll see Denali approaching, doing a foreleg stab, trying to engage Grizzer. He tries to face off with Grizzer. That doesn't work. And you can see a slight elevation of Grizzer's tail at the base, holding it up a little bit, and then as soon as Denali tries to make eye contact, it goes again in a T1 over the back or T2 straight back. So body language says everything. And here in retirement, it's a little more difficult to film these two because they do like to interact with us. You'll notice a scar on Malik's face here. We are treating him with antibiotics. He had an abscessed tooth that became infected, and we actually saw that was the estimate of the vet. You know, obviously there's not a great way to investigate the inside of Malik's mouth to find out what's going on, but characteristically it appears that it's an abscessed tooth. And it itches. It's healing. We've got him on antibiotics, and it's starting to heal. And so he's going to do what he can to rub it on vegetation. And you can see why a fair amount of our working for wolves revenue and our efforts in working for wolves are in revegetating enclosures. Then he switches to a bigger tree, makes it a little bit easier, a little more stable, gets a little more friction. Notice he's not scraping the side that's got the abscess, just again, possibly a scent marking behavior, etc. And Shadow is doing well. Again, always keyed into the main pack when they're active. He does a short little burst of howl. He varies on how long he howls in response to them. You'll actually hear a little bit of a scuffle in the background with the pack, and he will approach the fence and kind of show some interest in what's going on in the main enclosure. But for the most part, they're very calm. Certainly, again, Shadow really likes certain people and interacts well with certain people. The back of the enclosure is, again, still fairly covered and fairly wooded. The wolves do spend some time back there. Shadow's got a interesting new den hole dug underneath the white pine that sits next to the pond. I believe he's hit the concrete of the pond in his digging. He's excavated quite a hole, and so we'll kind of keep an eye on that, see where he ends up. And again, here's a short little howl in response to the main pack activity. And usually if there's a wolf on top of the rock howling or on top of the den howling, it's probably Shadow, far more than Malik. Shadow retained probably psychologically that leader role, and Malik probably retained a little bit of that subordinate role. And now here's Malik on the rock. Ravens are an active part of the facility, and Malik had a torso that we fed him probably about an hour before we filmed this. The ravens were circling, and so he dragged it to the back of the wooded enclosure where there's more cover and less likelihood to be scavenging by ravens. So the wolves do interact that way. And again, as time wanes here with 2010, we are already facing September. We are sponsoring a kind of a drive for 2,500 new members for the 25th anniversary. So if you haven't joined yet, please check out the website at wolf.org and become a member and help support these ambassador wolves as well as wolf education for the center. So thanks for watching.